Hey guys, welcome back. Today what I am going to start working on is this project right here. You may look at that and say, hey, that's a nice looking rifle. And it is. And once again, as always, or more often than not, this is a 1917 Enfield. This is a little different though. If we take a really close look to what's going on in here, this has been modified and I had to fix it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did with this rifle and what is left to do on it. This is a 1917 Enfield that has been opened up and modified to shoot a 338 416 Rigby improved. So that's this case right here, and just for a little reference, there is a 30-06 case. And this 30-06 case neck almost fits inside of that 338 case. But this cartridge is actually the 416 Rigby neck down to 338 is a parent child of the 338 Lapua. In this case right here is slightly bigger. There's less body taper and a 30-degree neck on this particular one versus the Lapua, which has, I don't know, what is it, a 23 degree neck, something like that, maybe a little more, and it's quite a bit more body taper in it. So this will hold, this is actually a bigger round than a 338 Lapua. It is the same case head diameter. The 416 is basically the parent case for the 338 Lapua, so this is 416 brass that has been necked down to 338. There's a lot that's been done to this thing already. This is a Richards Microfit stock. This is a Hart ratchet flute barrel. So this is a 28-inch 338 barrel. I haven't even checked the twist on it yet, but it's probably a 10 twist. It's pretty common. This does not have the trigger in it currently, but this was converted over to a cock on open with a Dayton TriStar trigger on this one. So if we take a look here, we have the Dayton TriStar cocking piece on there, and it's been modified. And I went through and I turned this bolt shroud down to make it look nice and clean, and cleaned it up and cut it back. The big problem with this rifle is that when I got it, it had some issues with feeding, and they couldn't get it to feed. Whoever did this before couldn't get this thing to feed properly. You'd put shells in there and they just pop out one after the other. They wouldn't retain themselves in there. So at some point, I don't know if the owner or another gunsmith made a single shot follower for this guy. Actually not too bad, but it almost looks like plastic epoxy putty that they put in there to hold this thing in there. So that was just glued up on the bottom side of the action, and it was a single shot essentially. And that works fine, but this rifle is kind of set up to be a hunting rifle. It's got the contours, it's got the barrel and all that stuff. It's a tad bit on the heavy side, but you know, if you're not hiking through the mountains, you could totally take this hunting. The other thing that's been done here is somebody straightened out the floor plate at one point in time, and they did a pretty decent job. It was bent a little bit. I had to straighten it back out, and here's where we're starting to run into problems. First off, this rifle needs to be taken out of the stock, rebedded, and refit. Why? Because this trigger guard sits way too low in the wood here. As you can see here, there's wood here, there's wood there, there's wood recessed there, and it's recessed up here, and it's flush right here and pretty close on this side, but there's a bunch of, it shouldn't be that low into the stock. And we have room here. Since I straightened this out, we have room to lift this up, raise this up, and get our back flush and our front flush, and make sure that these spots here are at or below, just below the wood line. And then we'll have to come in here and we'll have to shave all this off, recontour it, and refinish the stock. Up in here, this will need to be redone, all that stuff. And on the front side, or the top side here, this stock didn't get trimmed out near the rear tang. So when we're looking through here, all this wood along here, the receiver is set below it. So this all needs to be shaved out, this needs to be shaved down, this needs to be shaved down. We need a little bit of clearance here yet in the bolt, because when you lock the bolt down, it hits the wood and not the metal. If you listen, you can hear it. It's a knocking instead of a clacking like that. It should click like that every time you do it. So it's close, but it needs a little work. Also right in here, where our ejection port is, there's a lip here that shouldn't be there. If we look here, there's the wood is above the ejection port. That's not correct. This is pretty close. This is shaved back too far, but I can't fix that. And one of the last things about this is we have uneven, I mean, this could be sanded down here, but it's touching on this side and there's not a lot of wood left here to cut out. So I'm gonna rebed this entire thing, and we're gonna shift this over to center this out, and then after we center it, we can come through and shave this. See, there's a flat spot up there. We will match this flat spot with this flat side and get the same width on each side, and then we'll have spacing on each side, so everything will be symmetrical here. The last part having to do with this stock is kind of strange, to say the least. This end cap, well, they're typically not left flat like this. They're usually radiused to some degree, or I like to cut them back like this, put a little bit of an angle back into them, and then you can round that off. Or if you want to just round these off the way it is and leave it kind of squarish, but I think I'm gonna cut it back a little bit and put a little bit of an angle on there and smooth all this off, and that should get us kind of back to square one. The sad thing about this is that the finish on here actually isn't too bad. There's some sanding marks here that didn't get sanded out, but other than that, I mean, the finish is actually pretty decent on here. So whoever did the finish did a pretty good job with the actual finish side of it. But the fitting is a tad bit lacking. One more thing we're going to have to fix, and we'll see when I get to it, but the buttstock has been grinded through. And this is the reason they make fixtures like this. I think these are Pacimar. These reference plates, when you're trying to figure out what size pad you need with the stock, they make these plates. You can fit it on the end here, and as you can see, that's a large. That's borderline, it's too wide. So let's go down to a medium. This is just an example. There's a magnum, a small, medium, large. Here would be a medium. So our medium should work there. It'd be pretty dang close. But so that's for the most part width and a little bit of the height. But unfortunately, if they would have maybe tacked this over that way just a hair, they may not have ground through that. So now, I mean, it functions and it works, but it's really ugly and it doesn't look good. Just as a reference, this is an example of if it's all fitted nicely and perfectly how it looks typically. This is a rifle I built a few years ago. I got next to nothing into it. I got the stock off of eBay. It was pretty cheap. I had these parts sitting around and I did a lot of the work myself to make it look nice like this. But as you can see, not all these stocks always, a lot of these stocks come cut across the bottom here for these safeties. You can see it there. And it's flat, and it's just easier to drop it in there and be done with it. I think this looks a lot nicer when you can do it. If you carve your own stock, you can do this, but this is contoured perfectly around our safety here, so when our safety is engaged or disengaged, it fits perfectly along the wood there. That's what it's supposed to sound like. Not hitting any wood. And then around our tang here in the back, all this wood is pretty much perfectly flush with the back of our receiver here. All the way along here. Even got a little bit of contour here, and we got wood that fills our receiver up. And all the way along here, it's all perfectly flush. In our ejection port here, this is all flush with our bottom metal. and that's the way it should be. Sometimes people put radiuses or curves or whatever in here, but I like to leave them like that. And that's, you know, not much to it. You just kind of draw within the lines basically. Here's an example of kind of just a straightened off fore end cap that I did. It's just rounded off to kind of make it a smooth transition, but that's, you know, it should be something like that. It shouldn't just be cut straight off. And here's our bottom metal. Don't mind these screws yet. They need to be, they're just dummy screws, but this rifle hasn't been blued yet, so it still needs to be final polished and blued. But if you look here, everything around here is all flush, flat, and even all the way around here. And that's the way they should be. Nice, smooth, and clean looking. Alright, so here was what the main issue with this thing was. They started grinding on it basically by hand to open up these feed rails. These rails are pretty critical when you're doing them. It's really boring, and I'm not going to go over it right now because it's extremely boring, tedious, and it takes a while to do it on a mill. And you got to set the mill up right and all this other stuff. So not going to go over it, but I cleaned up what I could here. Stuck this thing on the mill. Believe I got a 7/16 ball mill, and I went in here and cut all this out. There's a little step right there. That step doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I left it there because it actually fed just fine after I did it. But these things get opened up from back here where the trigger plunger goes, or the spring, all the way to the front, and it cuts out a little tiny bit of the lug, and it ramps the lug. The lug gets ramped at about a 45, and this all gets cut out. And you don't cut the actual lips here right up under the bolt. That's the last thing you do. You can shave those out a little bit. There's specs that you got to keep within, but once you get to those specs, you got to start feeding them and cycling them and testing them by hand, and it takes a lot of time to do it, and to do it right, and to make them function and feed properly. Well, let's take a look at this bedding here. In the grand scheme of things, I mean, is this a horrible bedding job? No, it's not too bad. It's a few voids here and there, but not, you know. The lug area here is in really good shape. A little bit of bedding on the barrel, that's good. Some little gaps here and there. On the front side of the lug, not as big of a deal. But we got a gap here that's just a cosmetic gap. We got a gap here, cosmetic, some cosmetic gaps here. And the back side of this is actually not bedded too bad. This little glob of goop there, that could have been cleaned up a little bit, but the grand scheme of things, not the worst one I've seen. But I'm not sure what they used here for bedding agent, and this isn't going to matter here. This is actually pretty good. Nice contact here, nice contact up here, and then, you know, we fill in. I like to usually fill in as much as I can here. It's not really necessary in the middle here, but sometimes it gives it a little more support in case, say, you dropped it or something and you hit it against something, then it would potentially keep it from bending or getting as much damage. But this isn't a big of a deal down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably grind most of this out of here. And the thing about it is, I'm not sure about the back. I might just do the whole thing, because I'm going to leave maybe a little pad back here to keep our height, because we don't want to come up any further than we're at, and we don't really want to go down any further because we're already down pretty far. But the depth that this is sitting at right now is actually pretty decent, and I'm pretty happy with it. This bedding stuff could have been cleaned up here. That's kind of an oversight, but I'm going to grind most of this stuff out of here. Let's take a look and see what we have here exactly. I don't know if you can see, but there's a flat there and there's a flat there. This flat is quite a bit bigger, so we're going to favor this side when we redo this. It's about 121 thousandths on that side and 70 thousandths on that side. So yeah, it's almost double the thickness on this side. I can't put more material back on here, unfortunately, and there's quite a bit getting back here. There's quite a bit too. Kind of an optical illusion when you're looking at laminates like this, but we're probably going to end up favoring, I'm going to try and measure and see where I need to be, and I might actually try and gap this with tape and try and get our barrel sitting almost perfectly lined up in here, so when I come back and I redo this, I'm probably going to get as close as I can to the gap on this side and leave it, and then if I have a minimal gap on this side, I can come in the inside and shave it, or if our gap is good, then I can come on the outside here and smooth it off and match this side. Ideally, I would like it to be, you know, 120 thousandths on this side and 120 thousandths on this side, but we're going to end up being about 70 on each side by the time this is done. I have this stock set up on my mill, and I'm going to just mill a bunch of that garbage out of there. Do I need to get down to bare wood? Ideally, but I've actually used, I'm pretty sure this is fiberglass resin and fiberglass flock, and this is actually where the term glass bedding a rifle came from, was using glass epoxy and bedding. So the stuff actually works pretty good. I've got rifles that shoot extremely well with it, but ideally, yeah, we'd get down to bare metal, but I'm not too worried about it. All I'm really trying to do is get the majority out of it so we can shift this thing over and get the barrel moved a little bit. That's all we need to do, just a little tiny bit. So I'm going to take out probably a chunk behind the lug and some on the sides here and this block. I'll start out, this is I think a 3/8 4 flute end mill, and we'll just start cutting and hogging material out. It doesn't really matter, we're going to replace it all anyways, so. Alright, after about 20 minutes of milling, here's what we got. I mean, it's pretty much all, I'm not too worried about this side of the front because it's going to shift that way. I'm still going to grind some out of here, probably by hand. You can't get everything with that mill, but you can get quite a bit. I got a little pad, left a little pad right here for our depth, and then I left a little pad way in the back here, just on the very back of the tang. And so I'm going to grind out just with a Dremel sanding drum, grind out around here some of these curved edges, some of these curved edges around here, the front receiver ring, and along the edges here. All we got to do is get over that way, maybe a couple thousandths of an inch, but we want to leave a little material there so we can get some good bedding in there too. So I'm probably going to cut some more of all of this out of here, and so it's just grinding away with a little hand grinder, but that mill takes out quite a bit of most of the stuff, and it makes it look nicer for, you know, not that it matters at this point, but when we go back and clean it up after we're done bedding, it'll look really nice. Alright, so now the moment of truth. We'll stick our action in there and see if we can shift it a little bit. Hopefully we should still be pretty close to our same height and everything, but this should be ample room in there. Alright, so I got it cut out enough to where we can tape this side of the barrel and not put necessarily force on it, but we're gonna keep it from shifting back to where it was. So if I press the receiver a little bit, twist the receiver, you can see we get a little bit of movement in there. That's all I really need. Is I basically just need, and it's kind of illusion, it's an illusion there because you should see right there where the actually round part of the barrel is. It's touching that side, so that's all we really are looking for. Let me hold it up straight here. So there we go. Alright, back at it here. What I'm going to do with this thing is I'm going to actually bed the bottom trigger guard first, because there's a couple ways to do this. So I want this trigger guard to sit up further in to the bottom of the stock. You could go through and pillar bed this, that would take care of it, but being that I've got so much slop on both sides of it at this point in time, I am going to kind of forego that. All I'm going to do is, this is a pretty snug fit inside here, the trigger guard inside the wood. So I'm just going to put bedding compound inside here and put our trigger guard where we want it, flush to the spots that are flush. See, we taped all this off so we can mitigate, you know, I'm probably going to have to refinish this anyways, but mitigate a little bit of this. And then I'm using down here, this is Marine Tex. This is amazing stuff. It works very well. It shrinks almost nothing as far as shrinkage. There is almost nothing, I should say. So all we're going to do is start globbing our Marine Tex in here and working it in there, and we're just gonna, we're basically bedding it like we're at a rifle. Alright, so there we go. So now I'm going to let it, I got it pretty much set where I want it. I'm going to let it set up and we'll come back clean it up. Here we are at the lathe, and I'm going to clean this crown up a little bit. It looks okay, but it could be better. So all we have here is a special ground little carbide bit, carbide cutter that I made. And it cuts very nice crowns. So let's crank. See where we're running. We can speed that up a little bit more. And the bore is running within a 10. Where we want it. Perfect. Just gonna put a little oil on that cutter and be done with her. Just gonna touch off, dial in a tad bit. That's it. The only other thing I'm going to do is come in and put a tiny little chamfer on the outside here. And just the side of a threading tool, it'll do that. Just kind of break the edge there a little bit. And stop. And there we go. There's a brand new, fresh, squeaky clean, shiny crown on there. A little recessed target crown. That'll work out well. And I might actually cut a little deeper because I see somebody chamfered the lands there, so I'm just going to cut a little deeper and then we'll be done here. Perfecto. So I'm going to flip this thing around and I'm going to actually do the chamber end too, because that's a little rough and I could use a little TLC. Here's the back end of the chamber, and I don't know if you can see there, but there's some marks up on the top there. That's the top of the barrel. I don't know what those are from, but I'm gonna clean this cone out. It's actually it can be, we can go in a little deeper with it. It's pretty shallow right now as far as the depth this way, and the chamber is pretty deep compared to this cone and the outside edge of the barrel here. So I'm just going to take a cut across there and clean it up, and then I'm going to go through here and just ever so gently radius the inside edge and this edge right here, because this cartridge comes up and it rides on this. So smoothing these out will save your brass and give a little easier feeding. Just like that. There we go. Alright, all done. Alright guys, at this point I think what we're going to do is we're going to cut this video in half, and I'm going to finish this rifle in the last half, or the second part of this video series. As you can see, it's already finished, but we're going to go through and show you putting this thing together and the final fit and finish and all that good stuff. The other thing I'm going to do is go out and test fire it. So I want you guys to comment below and let me know how accurate you think this thing is going to be. Is it going to be 1 MOA, half MOA, 3/4 MOA? 5-shot groups at 100 yards. We'll check her out. And I will give you a little bit of information to try and give you a guess. It's a hard barrel. I'll be shooting 250 grain Hornadays. Probably shooting off some sort of a rest. I don't know. That'll give you an idea. If you guys enjoyed that, please let me know below. Give me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and get notifications. And until next time, see you guys later. Thanks for watching. And be sure to check out the next one.